I'm just going to play the raw drums. Cool, so let's get into how this template works. How do we get a template together? What are the considerations? The considerations for me were to have control over the gain structure. The first section is mainly to do with setting some basic levels, combining mics together, and the second section is about summing those down and providing parallel tracks to enhance that. And there's quite a lot of, there's parallel on top of parallel. Let's have a look at how we go about getting a template together. So just say, for example, those are my template tracks. What I would do is I would delete all of that out of the session. I'd get rid of all of the hidden tracks as well. And what I would then do is go and save as a template. And then you specify the location. And the location, in this case, it's already pointing to there. But the location is the documents folder, users, Daniel, documents, Pro Tools, track presets. So that's where that's pointing to. If you go up one step, this folder doesn't exist. You can download a program called Trasher. And on the second page of that, I'm using Pro Tools 12. So it's got something here which creates the track preset folder. So just say, for example, this didn't exist. What it would do would create the track preset folder there. I mean, you can do this yourself, but you'll see when I click this, it's now created all of these categories from which we can choose a group of tracks to come up when we select them. So I'm just going to delete those. There we go. My mix bus is a .ptxt file, which is a template, as you can see there. And that's just simply from saving it into the track preset folder under that folder, so I can find it there. If I press Control-Shift-N or Command-Shift-N on a Mac, that brings up our tracks, and you'll see that they appear here, separated from the usual standard Pro Tools fare. So if I go to Mix Bus, there it is. Now looking at the drums, I've actually created drum processing. All right, so I'm going to press that again, Control-Shift-N. There we are. And then I'm going to hit Enter to create that. And there you go. So these tracks here, these are my current tracks. I'm just going to change the color of those to differentiate them. Drums I like to keep blue, just always have. And these are all of my template tracks. So it's quite large. What we're going to do is drag the audio from these tracks to the appropriate corresponding tracks here. Let's get the hand tool. These are all consolidated to the beginning, so I'm just going to drag that down to kick in. We've got kick out. Where's kick out? That one. Snare top. Now, the kick trigger track, what I like to do is Alt click or Option click the kick in, and I'm going to make a copy of that over to the kick trigger. And all that's going to do is tell trigger here where all the transients are, so that if I do need a sample, it already has the kick track for a trigger. I'll just work my way through these. So the snare top 2. So I've got 2 snare tops. It looks like the bottom. Whoops, I don't want to copy that. I want to drag that. Snare bottom. Tom 1. I know it says tom 3, but I know for a fact because I played these drums that it's actually a floor tom, so I'm going to delete tom 3 out of my template. I'm going to move tom 3 down to the floor tom. We've got overhead left. Now I need to copy one of my top mics to the snare trigger track. Same deal as the kick drum. If I need it, I've got it there already ready to trigger the snare. Let's continue dragging audio down. We have no overhead mono, so we'll get rid of that. We have no room left and right. We've just got the mono room, and we have no second kick in, so I'm going to get rid of that. And then we just get rid of those tracks. Done. Okay. All right, so let me explain what I've got here. So I've got all of these are being sent over to here. And there is a method to my madness, which I'll go into. Let's have a look. So I've got all these kick tracks are being sent to the kick master, which comes down here. That then has 3 parallel sends. So it's sending out to these parallel tracks. Same goes for the snare. So the snare is being sent out to the snare master. All of these are being combined to a mono snare master and being sent out to 4 parallel tracks, which are these ones here, which we'll get into soon, and so on and so forth. The toms are being sent out to their own master, so they're grouped together there, and they're getting sent out to a cross track, which is there. So far that's fairly straightforward, but you're probably wondering why you would do that. The way I look at it is, I don't want to have to think about 3 different kick drums. I want to spend the majority of my time in this section. I want to use this section to combine and blend, but still have it there just in case I need to go back and fix something. So if I need to go, all right, I didn't need that much kick out, I can pull it out. What this allows me to do is have those 3 channels or those 4 channels come down to just one channel. From my point of view, that helps with organizing the session so that it doesn't become overwhelming. A lot of people, they like to bounce these down to one kick track, and that's fine. That's a valid way of doing it. But if you wanted to change that balance, you would have to then make those tracks active. I like to have it all there. I like to set this section up, and once it's set, once you've done the majority of what you need to do, then you've got it. But the beauty of this is that I've got these tracks are actually grouped together, and I'll just show you here. So I've got them grouped to a VCA, and what the VCA allows me to do is, if I was going to use the kick trigger track, I could control how loud all of those are as a group, but still allow me to make a balance change like that. And it's all relative, as you can see, which is pretty cool. That's VCAs. What I like about it is that if I'm working on the kick drum over here, all of these tracks here are solo safe. And what that allows me to do is I can solo up the kick drum, I can solo the snare drum if I want, for example. I can get the overheads. I really like the flexibility that it gives me, because if I decide I really like a certain balance, but maybe it's too loud, because when it gets some to here, it's hitting a compressor too hard or something like that, all I do is I can pull that down and adjust how loud that is going into here. So I can do my blend, and I can do the overall balance between different kit components, and then I've got a few options here for blending it together. And the other aspect to having the VCAs is that I've got all of these are grouped by one master VCA, I guess you can call it, which controls all of these VCAs. So if I've got a blend that I really like, but I am maybe hitting some things too hard down the line, I can pull this overall blend down. It's a nice, neat way of being able to control the balance of the kit. One thing I forgot to mention is the reason I have these mono is so that if you've got one side of the overheads is a bit uneven, you can even them up quite quickly. The room left and right tracks, same thing there. You can do the same with those. All right, let's do a quick balance. Cool, I think that's not a bad rough balance. I'm going to coalesce these. So just setting them back to unity, and all of these have, this balance here has remained the same. If I have a compressor here and it's getting hit too hard by the kick, which is usually the loudest, or the snare maybe is getting slammed a bit too much by a compressor further down here, rather than turn down, say, the input on the compressor, I would much rather just lower the overall level of the kit so that the balance across the entire kit, as I've set it up, is the same, but the loudest thing, the kick, the snare, whatever it is, isn't hitting as hard. And I feel that's a really great way of setting up the gain structure for downstream processing. All right, let's move on. So we've got a balance. Let's have a look at how we go about processing that kit. I like to work on sounds individually with drums because I know what it is that I'm going for in certain aspects, and then I'll kind of retweak that in context. So I'm going to solo up the kick. Let's have a look at what we can do with the kick. I'm going to pull down this trigger track, we don't need it. So I'll mute that. We may need that later on, so I'm just going to keep it there for safekeeping. Let's have a look at what have I got here. I've got the Blue Cat frequency analyzer. Turn up the precision. So there's quite a lot of activity there. We want to add a bit of definition to the kick. In particular, I'd like to build up the sub content. Now I know that the song is in B, which is 61 or 62 hertz down in that area for the kick drum. I can't remember how well that kick drum was tuned. I'm sure it was in the ballpark. With this kick sub track, I'll just mute the kick. We have the side chain from the kick is being sent out to this gate here. All right, and this is a classic trick. We've got a signal generator before that. It's been set at 50 just as a kind of starting point. I'm going to set it to 62. It's set to sine wave peak -20. So that's feeding the gate. And the idea is that this kick side chain sends a copy of the kick into the side chain. I've got the side chain on. I've also got the EQ on. Got it set to 5K so that the attack of the kick is sensed by the gate. But I've also got it set to 50, and I'll change that to 62. And that send is pre-fader, so I've muted the kick, and we'll just listen to what that's adding. We'll bring down the threshold. The gate is set with the fastest attack, 100 millisecond hold, and 38 millisecond. These are pretty arbitrary. Let's listen to some sub. We've got our sub track, but what I haven't gone into is this channel strip here. I've got the EQ on this set at 50 and 50. So I've got a bump at 50 and I've got a low pass at 50. I'm going to change those now to 62 and 62 respectively. Why have I got this on here? Well, part of the issue with keying the gate from a low frequency is that if you have a fast attack, it usually means that you get a click at the beginning. So if I bypass the EQ, you can hear that click. What the low pass filter does is it stops that click. And I like to put a little bit of a bump. It's quite a bit of a bump actually. It's 8 decibel bump at the frequency that you're keying, just to help it poke out even more. We want this track to provide some low sub punch. So we've got rid of that clicking sound and we've enabled the gate to open very fast without having to compromise and dial that back. That's kind of my workaround for that. In context, let's bring that in. You can feel the bottom just drop away when you mute that track. The idea is to get it to sound natural and to get it to fit just underneath. I'm going to exaggerate it a little bit. Without adding any EQ to the kick itself, we've managed to add quite a lot of low end to that. And that's obviously an old EDM trick. On some kicks, you'll see that there will be a peak at a certain frequency, and you can kind of use that to guess where the fundamental for this sine wave generator should be. So that's the kick sub. Let's mute that. Let's move on to kick crush. And that does exactly what it's meant to do. It's the same. It's a pre-fader send. It's at unity. And it's sending out to the kick crush. Let's mute the kick so we can just hear this. So it's literally just a stock compressor, quite a fast attack. and a slow release. I've added in the sidechain EQ just to bypass everything below 100 Hertz so that the compressor can clamp down on less of the bass information. And when we add it back in to the original kick, so it just gives it a bit more power, and it's obviously made it louder. Okay, so we'll mute that for now. All right, let's move along to the kick attack track. Same deal. We've got it running in parallel on a pre-fade ascend, and that allows us to mute the kick master and just hear the effect. So I'll bring the fader up on that. You could use just about any gate for this, but I have a strong preference for the trigger gate. It does a very good job of working the way that I want it to. Let's have a listen. So this isn't actually triggering any samples. All it's doing is we're just using this for the gate. You can use a standard stock gate like we did here. It will give you the same sort of thing. Why would we have that? When you get into a dense mix, you may find that you can't locate the kick drum, and what this kick attack track does is it provides the front end of the kick note by blending that back in underneath the original. If we get to the point where we've got to a really dense chorus, we can just put a little bit of that in the mix. That allows the ear to find where the kick drum is in that mix. You can overdo it. Generally, I think I probably have it fairly low in the mix. It just depends on what sort of mix it is. Let's have a listen to that with the original kick drum. So I'm just going to play around with the hold and the release just to fine tune it. You can see there visually that it's picking out the transients. So that's what that does. What if we add in all of the parallel tracks? What do we get? So at this point I might go back and gate the kick out. It's got quite a lot of spill on that. I'll get that sorted. Let's listen in context. Without the parallel tracks. width. So you can hear there's a massive difference there, and it kind of has the effect of these two in particular have the effect of adding in a bit of a smiley face EQ without actually EQing the kick itself. And I find that's fairly important for drums, being that we end up screwing a lot with the phase relationships in these multi-mic setups. So this is a nice way of dealing with that without actually having to reach for an EQ. Okay, so at this point maybe we feel that the kick is a bit too much, so I'll just lower that. I'm going to coalesce that. So a lot of avenues for being able to tweak the sound the way we want. Let's move on to the snare. I'm going to work on that in solo. Similar sort of concept with the snare crush, except I've got an 1176 and it's set to all buttons in mode with a fast release and reasonably quick attack. Let's dial that in. Alright, what I might do is throw on a gate. Quite like the gate function in this channel strip too. Alright, so I've taken care of a lot of the spill there. Let's have a listen to that in context. Big change. And this is what I mean about having the flexibility of being able to go, all right, we probably should throw in a gate there, and have the ability to do that without being kind of cornered, feeling cornered into doing particular types of processing. There's plenty of insert slots there. We can continue on with this with EQ and all sorts of things. So let's move on to the next parallel track, which is the snare body. This one's an interesting one, same sort of deal, pre-fader, and got a 909 sample here, which is from the Boom Pro Tools plugin. You could get anything from 909 libraries, but this in particular is a 909 kick. Let's have a listen to that on its own. Let's dial that in. So the idea is that I want to have that only hitting on the major hits. I don't want that necessarily on all the ghost notes and things that are in between on the like the quieter hits on the snare drum. So let's see how we've got that dialed in. So that's picking up all those transients properly, but it's too loud. Pretty big difference adding that in. Let's move along, mute that. This is the same concept as the kick attack, but with the snare. So I'll mute the snare, I'll bring up the snare attack, We'll dial in the transient for that. All right, let's mix that in. And let's throw in the other parallels. I can hear that I'm getting a lot of bottom snare there, so I'm going to pull that down. So without. With. And as ever, we're going to listen in context. Without. With the parallel in. Now, obviously, there's a big volume difference there, but you can hear how we're able to manipulate the envelope of the sound. You did see there I had to readjust the balance of pretty much everything because everything affects everything. But there is enough flexibility in this template that I can do that. Let's move along to snare verb. So I'll mute the main snare, but I'll solo that so that I can hear all of these. Actually, instead of doing that, what I'm going to do is just go and kill the sends. So obviously adding in a bit of snare verb in the case of if you've had to gate something quite heavily. So that's an option there. That's the tiled room preset from the effects rack sound toys. Now, tom-toms. If I decide that I want to round them out, make them sound a bit different, I'll EQ them here so that I'm giving them individual EQ, and then if I need to, I can EQ the master. These tom-toms are actually cut out from the drums themselves, so go to here. So they don't need to be gated. But you know, maybe I want to go in and clean those up. Take off the top. Maybe I'll boost the fundamental on that one. And do the same here. All right, we'll do the same here. I'm going to cut some of the cymbal out of it. Okay. And see if I can find a bit of the upper frequencies. without. Yeah, okay. I'm going to leave that boost out. Right. So they're already basically gated, and I've got a parallel track set up for that. I'm setting to an all buttons in 1176. Let's solo up the tom-toms, and we'll mute the direct. All right. Now you'll notice this is a mono crush. You can make it a stereo one, but I actually prefer to keep it mono. And the idea is to try and get a little bit of length out of that. All right. And I'm going to throw something else on here. Which is Little Altar Boy. It's just an idea I've got for these tom-toms to make them bigger. I'm going to pitch shift them, and I'm going to blend that back in. Let's do that in context. So I'm just going to add in a bit more top end to them overall, and a bit of a low end boost, and a bit of a high pass. I might actually experiment with panning them a bit broader. Not bad. All right. I might take the hats and the ride down just a touch. Going back to the start. All right, so that's too much, but I've got it there. Let's take the entire tom-toms down, which is the beauty of this. I feel like now I'm missing a bit of the overall room sound, so I'm going to boost that back up. Quite like it. It's starting to gel together. Obviously, if I wasn't explaining everything I'm doing, it would take a lot less time. So that's the tom-toms, that's the snare, that's the kick. And these are more or less, if you want to EQ the cymbals, the room, if you want to compress the room or anything like that, you can do it. Generally, before I add any individual EQ, I'll go to the master and have a play with, I really like this channel strip. I like the fact that it's got the EQ and the compressor I can add in post EQ, so I can really hype it up. I'll go for a warm setting. Should I go auto gain? No, I won't. Let's boost the EQ into there. Now it's starting to come together. It's a little bit too much. So you can hear how that's really starting to gel. A good point here is that we're obviously peaking out already. So what I've got in the template is a drum VCA, which you can use to control all of these. So I'm going to just take it down and make the compressor here hit a little less hard. Might take it down even more. So just to explain, that's the compressor after the EQ. So we're boosting those frequencies into the compressor, and that's kind of getting the compressor to move and really kind of tell the compressor what to compress and how hard. And obviously I'm just playing around with the threshold here to get it to sit the way I want. I might even actually back off the ratio just a touch. So it's nothing really. It's 2-to-1. so I might need just a little bit more attack. So you can see how you can get, you know, with pretty much not that much processing really, you can get a very good drum sound with a lot of these parallel tracks. And, you know, one EQ compressor here, a little bit of EQ and compression throughout, but not really that much. And I find that, you know, having that there as the main processor of the entire drum kit, it really helps to gel that entire kit together. Now, one thing I didn't explain about the attack track is that you could group these together if you wanted to and boost them up in the choruses so that you can get the kick and snare to cut through. So that's a nice little trick, and because it's built into your template, it's there, it's ready to go. Whilst this is receiving the kick attack and this is being sent out to the center, I've also got these ones here which are actually sending it out to the left and the right. The reason being is that if there is something covering up the center frequency wise, it's masking it, then I've got both the left and the right sides kind of covered. I did do some A/B comparisons, and what I found is that it was actually beneficial to send it LCR, so left, center, right. Same with the snare drum. Provides a lot of attack obviously, so it's doing its job. So these are obviously this compressor here. Pushing those faders up is going to affect how that compressor is hitting. If you don't want to do that, then you can just create another send here and send that out to the main left and right out of the mix. You know, just literally go, all right, I'm going to send it out to mix. You can send it direct. Next, what have we got? So we've got this balance happening here, and looks like all of these tracks have the option to have a parallel. So this is a parallel, and if I just do that, Control Alt H, which send am I sending those blends to? I'm sending it to F by the looks of it. Yep. Okay, so that's now created a mix, an entirely separate mix that mirrors exactly what's happening down here. So I'm going to mute the main channel. I'm going to bring that up. And I'm going to copy that across. So, okay. Exactly the same as what we've got there, except with this one, I am going to compress the snot out of this. And I might even throw in a gate just for a bit of experimentation. All right. So I'm just adding in a parallel compressed track, which is compressed quite heavily. Let's see if I mute the overhead send. Just going to kill that gate for a second, and I'll get a bit of a similar balance frequency wise, but because we're hitting that compressor a lot harder, the compressor is obviously going to react differently, and it probably will enhance a lot of the high frequency content. So we've just got to adjust the balance of this, but obviously copying that to sends has helped get a rough estimate of where to start, and then we'll just blend from there. Cool. All right, let's blend that back in. So that's the parallel for the drums themselves. Let's turn off all of the parallel treatment. In fact, I'm going to group them all together so that I can just quickly turn them on and off. Let's go percentage. And in terms of, we can turn the EQ, we can turn it all the way back to where we started more or less. Turn off these EQs and the gate. Okay. Now, some of these I've obviously overdone so that you can hear them on YouTube, and the idea is that you try and do some of this stuff in solo and build up the tones of the drums. I could still continue to do more and more and more, but ultimately it's how it fits into the mix. But you can see from this template there is a lot of flexibility in building up the sound. If you don't need the kick attack, if you don't need the snare attack, you just get rid of them. But you know, they're really great to have there ready to go, as is the parallel, and you know, you use what you have to. Hopefully you get a sense now of how valuable it can be to have that set up in this way, so that you can control the gain structure through the first half of the template. And this is all about parallel treatment and building up a bigger sound. We haven't really done all that much. Some people, you know, you probably find on some mixes you'll need to add in some samples, you know, to go into here and say, oh, I want an indie drums. What do we go with? Go with a snare drum. Let's add that in just for a bit of fun. I actually don't mind that. That's a rough balance that I've done there of the indie drums Gretsch kit, 96 kilohertz sample. There are always options there that are open and available to take advantage of. So we've taken a really good sounding drum kit and really kind of hyped it up with not much EQ. In some cases, fairly modest compression, in some cases a lot, pretty extreme, but sometimes you need to use extreme moves to get extreme results. And as ever, do this in context, do it in solo if you need to, and kind of figure out what needs to be rebalanced. Obviously, I can tweak on and on and on and on, but that's the general idea. I like to go in and do some subtractive EQ, just little bits here and there in the first half of the template, and the second half is about shaping tone, so I might do more additive stuff there. If you get to the chorus and you need a bit more punch, group them together. If you want a bit more length from the kick and the snare, push those faders up. A lot of flexibility there. It's all pretty much to do with how you route it. So I've found a lot of use out of this in a lot of different genres. As I said, use only what you need to. Do as little processing as possible, except on a global level. So work globally. You're creating the blend of the drums from here first, then you're moving on to hyping up certain aspects of the sound, and then getting an overall cohesiveness to the drums by compressing, EQing, and getting a bit more loudness from running some parallel stuff. Don't be afraid to mute some of these, adjust them differently, but that's the general idea. So thank you for watching and happy mixing.